This episode of the House of Mystery is brought to you by Legacy Food Storage. The best way to protect your family is by being prepared. LegacyFoodStorage.com.
Crime and Forensics with Stephen David Lampley, your crime and forensic source from coast to coast.
Hi, I'm Mark Stocker. I was the original composer and sound designer for the hit show Forensic Files, and you're listening to Crime and Forensics with Stephen David Lampley.
You know you're lied to, right? It's not if you're lied to, it's do you know when it happens? Studies show that the average person can only catch a lie about 54% of the time. Heck, you might as well just flip a coin. But studies also show that a person who has been properly trained in lie detection can detect lies about 90% of the time. A big difference. Stephen presented his How to Catch a Liar session at the 2018 CrimeCon at the Gaylord Opryland Hotel and Convention Center, and had to be moved from the Washington Conference Room into the Presidential Ballroom due to the enormous number of registrations to hear his program. Even in the Presidential Ballroom, it was standing room only with 850 people seated. You can have this session brought to your company or organization. Go to StephenDavidLampley.com for more information.
We're honored to have with us today an international expert in the field of forensics. Carlos is a professor of forensics and speaker on forensic topics worldwide. His research in forensic microanthropology is groundbreaking. He is the science director of True Forensic Science and former subdirector of the Criminalistics Laboratory of Carabineros de Chile for the city of Punta Arenas, and expert of the Ballistics Criminalistics Laboratory of Carabineros de Chile de Santiago. I want to welcome to Crime and Forensics, Carlos Gutierrez. Welcome to the show, Carlos.
Hi. Thank you so much for this opportunity and this invitation. I'm really, really happy to be in your show.
I'm really honored that you took the time. And there was a television show some years ago called "Where in the World is Carmen Santiago?" And I know you traveled the world.
Yeah.
So let me ask you, where right now in the world is Carlos Gutierrez?
Yeah, right now I am in Santiago de Chile. This is my home. This is my hometown. I'm visiting my family and doing some errands, and yeah. But basically, I live on Honolulu in Hawaii. Yeah, I know it's totally fine. I'm faculty. I'm lecturer of forensic sciences on Chaminade University in Honolulu. I teach the crime scene investigation, physical forensic sciences, and other topics as well. Yeah, well, I'm from Chile originally. I'm born and raised in Santiago de Chile, in the capital city of the country. This is the people who know where Chile is. It's a really south of the South America, next to Argentina. Yeah, in Chile, we have a different structure. When you go when you finish the high school, you can go to the police academy, and the police academy is like a university. You can study there, you get your bachelor's degree there, and after that, you get your specialization. You study another 1 year and a half. I did that, and I got my specialization in criminalistics. My mom was a general. Was the really first general in the police, in this national police agency, and also the first Latin American general, woman general in one uniform. That was really, really exciting for me, of course. and I worked in some police station, but after I got my specialization, I pretty much worked all at the time I served in the lab. I was a deputy director in one lab in Patagonia in Punta Arenas. Was an amazing place to work. Of course, you are working on Patagonia. Always is amazing and exciting working there in this environment. I got a few really important cases over there, especially for working in the identification process for one fire. We can talk more about it during the program. And after that, I moved into Santiago again in the lab. I was the chief of the forensic anthropology lab over there, and also I was in charge of the forensic identification team during the earthquake, the Chilean earthquake in 2010. That earthquake was the sixth biggest earthquake in the world, and it was 8.8, and after 3 waves of tsunamis. And I was in charge of that identification process as well. And after I was the director of the forensic laboratory in another state in Chile under the same institution. And after that, I'm moving into Honolulu to do my master's degree in forensic sciences on Chaminade University. And right now, I'm pretty much working there, teaching forensic science around the world. Teach forensic science, of course, on Chaminade, but try to spread the word, especially for Latin America and developing countries, India and China as well, related with forensics and basically the updates. I helped in that way.
For me, for instance, I never really intended, it was not my lifelong goal to be a police officer, yet somehow along the way, life just that's just where I ended up. It sort of steered me in that direction. Was forensics for you? Is this something you always wanted to do, or is it something like me? You just sort of ended up there.
Yeah, no, I always looking for something related with forensic. I always that is what was my passion from when I was a kid. Always investigating things and looking for the answer for something. And I found in this institution in Carabineros, I found this way, and I can mix the two big things for me. I mean, helping people as a police officer, but also helping people as a forensic scientist, solving crimes, provide the right evidence, collecting, of course, the evidence and processing it at the scene, but provide the evidence in court for the judge can judge some suspect, and solve this crime and helping people. That was my goal in really my beginning of during my life, and I'm really happy to can do it. And now that is why I'm teaching to my students. Always help people. We have some special gift as a forensic scientist, and we need to help. That is our gift to the society, basically.
No, I like the concept. I like the theory there. All right, you wrote an article for the Journal of Forensic Toxicology and Pharmacology called "Forensic Microanthropology: A New Specialty in the Forensic Sciences." Now, this is a new field, correct?
Yes, it's a new field I developed during my research during my master's degree. I always have a case. I was always involved in cases related with identification process with victims in different ways, and also because I worked in Patagonia, I have a lot of cases related with a small fragment of bones or small fragments of evidence, and we don't know at that point if that fragment of evidence we collect during at the scene was bones or not. And usually you need to send it to DNA lab The issue with especially for developing countries, the resources are really limited. You don't have enough money to send. I don't know if you have some a fragment. I don't know 10, 100 fragments per week of evidence. Basically, you don't have the money, and especially in Latin America, we some countries have a lot of issues related with missing people, the desaparecidos, basically, and they need to get this help in this way. And I making this study with the Department of Defense, the DPAA, the Forensic Anthropology Lab in Hickam base on Pearl Harbor, and of course also with Chaminade University. And I developed this technique using microscopy to differentiate a small fragment of something or evidence you collect from the scene to figure out first if that fragmented evidence is bone or not, and if it's bone, is human or not human bone. Mm-hmm. And of course, if you can do this discrimination before sending everything to DNA, you can save money and also you can save time. And that's why this new field in the forensic sciences is successful. I'm traveling around the world teaching this technique. I wrote and also a book in Spanish first, because the majority of these issues are in South and Central America. But probably this year it's going to be published in English. To everybody can have access to this new science.
That's amazing. And now, how explain to our listeners, how is forensic microanthropology different from forensic anthropology?
Yeah, forensic anthropology is basically the macro. It's like a trace evidence. You have macro evidence and micro evidence. That means you have a small, big piece of evidence, like a whole complete bones or the half of the bone. You can tell pretty easy. I mean, the anthropologist can tell, and you can say, yes, this is a human, this is not a human, and this bone is, I don't know, is a part of the femur or humerus or whatever. But the issue is when you have a small, tiny fragment of, I don't know, less than 1 inch of something, you cannot tell if it's bone or not, and you cannot tell if it's a human or not human bone. That is the main issue. Remember, when with people, especially in massive graves, especially in Central America, sometimes they basically, to say in basic words, they chop the body and throw away. And I worked with some association, non-profit association in Mexico, in Sinaloa, and I teach this woman. It's an association, just women who lost their own relatives, husbands, sons, and they found some remains, but really, really tiny pieces of bones, and they don't know, and they cannot figure out if are human or not. And that's why the forensic microanthropology is really important, especially in this critical part, or in these countries when you have this type of crimes.
We're going to take a quick break, and we'll be right back.
Starbucks Via Instant is made with the same 100% Arabica beans served at Starbucks. So it's the only instant with the rich, delicious taste of the Starbucks coffees you love, and takes only seconds to make. Starbucks Via Instant, the only instant coffee of its kind. Available in black, flavored lattes, and iced coffee.
Hey, this is Stephen David Lampley, and I want to ask you to check out my book, Outside Your Door. It's a collection of true crime stories of my police career, and no, it's not just a bunch of stories about writing tickets and catching the bad guy, but it includes stories of life, human emotion, hope, and compassion. Stories that include how we use NASA to help us solve a homicide case, my negotiation and subsequent arrest of the Claremont Killer, a serial killer featured on America's Most Wanted and the only serial killer in history to voluntarily walk into the police department, where I promptly placed him under arrest. Other true crime stories include the heartbreaking story of a runaway child and the note that he left behind, the call of shots fired that found my partner and I in the middle of an ambush. These are just a few of the true crime stories found inside Outside Your Door, and there are many, many more. Outside Your Door has received multiple 5-star ratings on Amazon, Barnes & Noble, and Books A Million. We are now making available autographed copies just in time for the True Crime fan gift list for Christmas and the upcoming holidays. You can find the autographed copies available at StephenDavidLampley.com. I wrote Outside Your Door for you, and I hope you enjoy reading.
This is Stephen David Lampley. And you hit on something that I want to go back to a little bit.
Crime radio.
You were talking about the cost and the funding, and of course you said that was especially a problem there where you are, but that seems to be a problem among most police departments, pretty much anywhere, depending on where you are now. And with that, what type of equipment is needed on the crime scene for this type of analysis?
Yeah, for this type of analysis, for forensic microanthropology, you just need polarized microscope and a few elements you can buy in any hardware store, pretty cheap. I mean, a microscopic slide, a cover slide, some glue, and some sandpaper, and that's it. I developed this technique in the cheapest way possible with the all materials you can find everywhere in any country and any city in the world. I think the most difficult equipment you need to have is a polarized microscope, and every forensic laboratory have a polarized microscope. It's pretty basic equipment in any lab, and that's it. I mean, of course, you need the training, but as you see, you don't need a huge lab with a huge equipment and expensive one. You just need a polarized microscope, basically.
Now, I understand that the process you developed for identifying bone, human bone versus animal bone, it's my understanding that you're achieving a phenomenal 100% accuracy rate in this process. Is that correct?
Yes. Until this moment, I teach this technique to all my students on Chaminade University of Honolulu each semester. And until now, I have 100%. I mean, the students go through my class, they don't know nothing about it. And when we finish this special class for forensic microanthropology, they have 100% of accuracy of the analysis, and that is pretty amazing. Also, just to have the idea, I provide them my manual, but in Spanish, and they don't know Spanish. That means they can just learn at that time, and we have until this time and the 100% of accuracy of everything, and that is pretty amazing.
Wow, that's really amazing. I could talk about this for hours and hours, but obviously we don't have time. Now, of course, in any process, especially something like this, I would think, being micro in nature, there have to be some quantitative as well as qualitative considerations in the process. If you would, could you explain how those parameters, what they are? In other words, what are the conditions that you have to have for this process to yield effective results?
Yes, this is a really important question. Usually, when the bone is a really, really resistant material, they can preserve really, really well. But in sometimes, depending of course, the environmental condition, you can get the bones really fragile, and even if you can touch, they can break in more small pieces. I always recommend, and this process is just a presumptive process yet, and that is important. And I always teach my students this is just a presumptive test. If you have any doubt, if you have a really tiny piece of evidence, and if that is the only one you have, I recommend just doing the DNA, because sometimes it's the only evidence you have. You cannot have more than one piece of doing to do this process. I recommend doing just the mitochondrial DNA to don't lose the evidence, of course. But at this process of the forensic microanthropology is most qualitative process. It's more observation process, and the expert can evaluate the report for the court. Of course, I wanted in the near future do more research and make it more. Create some formula for doing this in more with more accuracy. Until right now, we have the 100% of accuracy. But remember, this is a science I developed since 2014. It's pretty new.
All right. Is this something that you see, or is this something that could possibly be used on other biological evidence on the crime scene?
Maybe. Who knows? Probably we need to do more research. I invite everyone, if is interested to do it, please do it, and we can feed more this and create more science, and that is important part. I mean, I'm start working with some association, also with Carabineros and other police agencies, the police of Bolivia, some police agencies in Mexico, in Colombia, also all the other police agencies in Chile, the PDI, to start create this new knowledge, to know the results in other countries. And that is the idea. I mean, I teach in India also this process, and we're working on, again, this is a really, really new science, is a really new technique, it's really novel, and we need to develop. I mean, it's science.
I think what you're doing is very groundbreaking. And I can see a lot of application, and obviously what you're doing is working.
Okay, we need to take a
and
break.
Yielding,
Please stay tuned as
results.
I ask
I mean, you're 100%, so you don't get much better than that.
Hello, this is Stephen David Lampley, host of the radio show Crime and Forensics, heard on KCAA in Los Angeles and other fine radio stations across America and on podcast. I wanted to take a moment to let you know that my latest book, The Dahmer Book, is now out and available on Amazon as well as other online booksellers. The Dahmer Book takes you into the life of Jeff Dahmer. We go into his home, with him to the Army. We go with him to the bars and to his apartment where he committed his heinous murders and cannibalism. But we go farther than that. I explain why Jeff was so very different from almost all other serial killers. In the book, I provide you with some of the pages from the official FBI case file on Jeff, as well as some of the pages from Jeff's official police confession. And you will also find pages from Jeff's military record. To help you visualize the events, there are several maps included that show where some of the events in Jeff's life took place. I am pleased to announce that right now, the Dahmer Book is number 2 on Amazon's hot new releases in psychiatry and in the top 50 in true crime. Get your copy of the Dahmer Book, paperback or digital, on Amazon. Thank you. Hey, this is Stephen David Lampley, host of Crime and Forensics. Are you looking for a way to reach out to millions of people? Well, guess what? You're in luck. Crime and Forensics is aired on fine radio stations across America, and as part of the Something Weird media family, we are the #1 true crime history and conspiracy radio show in America. Not only do you get the exposure of brick and mortar radio stations, you get the added exposure of shows broadcast as podcasts. Your ad will be heard on such media as Spotify, iHeartRadio, TuneIn, Spreaker, Stitcher, iTunes, and a host of other fine podcast websites. Contact Something Weird Media for more information on getting your advertising message out there and at a very low cost. Contact Alan or Kevin at somethingweirdmedia.com.
Hello, this is Sam from Marimbula, Australia, and you're listening to Crime and Forensics with Stephen David Lampley.
Now, you founded, I think, along with your wife, the True Forensic Science Organization. Tell us about that.
Yeah, Forensic Science is a company we create with my wife. My wife is an MBA. She's in charge of all the business part, and I'm the part of the science. And yeah, we create this company to basically provide training and consulting for other countries than America. We have some other experts in our staff, and we offer online classes in English and also in Spanish. We're doing some workshops. We did some workshops also during these years to police agencies in different countries. And also we offer a lot of video conference for free, some classes also for free, and everybody can be part of the science. Our idea is provide the forensic sciences, the update knowledge from America to the rest of the world for free in some cases, in other cases, of course, for some charge. But we are working on in that process to create more science. Latin America at this moment is they have a really, really awesome cases, but also they have some huge gap in science, in knowledge related with forensic sciences. They still learning from books really old, and that's why I'm probably this year also I will publish a new crime scene investigation book, but in Spanish with a really update knowledge for people and for also for all the agencies in Latin America. That is more our first goal, try to standardize the knowledge in Latin America and what we have right now in America. That is the first step.
Wow. Okay. That sounds like I'm going to have to make a visit to Chile and visit your organization.
Sure.
Now you worked on a, let's sort of change course here a little bit. You worked on a cold case from back in 1981 involving a homicide, and it's my understanding that your information and your research and investigation yielded a suspect and arrest. Is that correct? Yes,
we are working in some cases. We try to help people in different cases also. Sometimes people call me from different countries, especially from Latin America. They contact me by Facebook, from my Instagram or my Twitter, and they ask sometimes really people don't have the access to a really good expert, and we can try to help them in the best way.
Now, I'm gonna play like I'm a student. I'm a teenager, and I'm in school, and I'm considering a career in forensics. What would you tell me to do?
That is the best option you can have in your life. Yeah, the forensic. I will tell you, if you like it, do it. It's not like a CSI TV show. Kind of. It's really interesting field. I'm really happy to do it during almost 20 years. in my life. I will spend the rest of my life doing it. And yes, I pretty much I can explain my experiences. But I think the forensic science, basically, if you ask me, in 2 words, is helping people. That is the first definition pop up in my mind related with forensic science. The forensic scientists help others, help the society, help people sometimes in the worst moment of their life. Sometimes people lost the relative. Sometimes they can suffer a burglary or lost something, and the forensic scientists are there. The crime scene investigators are there to help them, to collect the evidence, to find the suspects who commit this crime, but also they can help the suspects who don't commit the crime, and someone put the evidence over there. That happened also, and that is important. If you ask me, forensic sciences for me is helping others. It serves the community.
All right. Let me sort of sideline here just a moment and ask you about something that's very prevalent here in the United States, and I'm assuming it's that way in other countries, but I'm not familiar. We have something here called the CSI effect, and I'm sure you know what that is. Do you find that a problem wherever you go?
Yes, it's a huge issue. It's, in America, they try to. We talk usually every single day in the university. I explain to the students, this is like a CSI, but it's not like a CSI. I mean, CSI is a TV show, and you always have programs like a CSI. I mean, you have, I don't know, Magnum, the old one. Now we have the new one. I mean, you have Colombo, or all these different Hawaii Five-O, but the old version, I remember I watched with my grandpa, that one. And now we have the new one. But it's always the crime TV shows or movies are really, really interesting to the people. But yes, I remember one time when I worked in the lab in Chile. In Chile, they changed the criminal system to the system like with attorney, defensor. We don't use jury, but with judges and present the evidence in court. And I remember one prosecutor asked me, because I went to the crime scene and I collect a few evidence. In this evidence, I collect also blood. And he asked me, this was really passed in the really early in the 2000s. And he asked me, okay, we are ready with the evidence. I need the result in 31 minutes in my office, please. I told him, okay, but that is impossible. Why? No, that is not true. You're lying me, because I saw last night in CSI in the TV show, they saw and they got the DNA in 20 minutes. You can do it in 30. That is TV, attorney. This is TV. It doesn't work in that way. and I at that time I thought, okay, these guys are lawyers, but they don't know about the science. And I started teaching, doing some workshop with them. And okay, yeah, they understand the way. But yes, that is really, really common. Some people start studying forensic sciences just to have a bunch and a gun and going around the city. That is the police officer work, not the crime scene investigator work. And yeah, it's kind of confusing for some people, but I try to explain in the best way to they can understand the best. I mean, it's a TV show and they need ratings, and that is and this is really good, but that is not real life.
So true. You know, I have heard, I've not experienced it myself, but I have heard that there have been instances where the jury instruction would include disregarding the TV shows and what they see on TV. And it's pretty amazing that it's gotten to the point that now the court system has to say disregard that, you know. And in my own field of police work, an investigator and street officer, You got people that want the grass fingerprinted. I mean, and then they want fingerprints back while you're standing there. They want all this evidence immediately, just like you said. And of course, and you and I know, and others know, that's not the reality of the case. But I was just curious if that was the case in other parts of the world as well.
Yeah, in every country in the world is the same. It's exactly the same. CSI is a really famous TV show.
All right. Well, we are about out of time, but where can our listeners go to learn more about you and find you online?
Okay, they can follow me in my social media, Instagram, Twitter, Facebook, LinkedIn, at Forensic Carlos G, and they can find me right away.
All right. Now, if a police agency is interested in looking at your true forensic science program, where do they go for that?
They can go to the website trueforensicscience.com, and they can look in the website, and they can send an email, and we can start the contact. No problem at all.
Okay, cool. Thank you so much. Carlos, I want to thank you for being on Crime and Forensics with us, and I'd love to have you back on the show again if you don't mind.
Sure, yeah. Thank you so much for your invitation. And yes, I'm really happy to be in again in your show. We can talk about my experience in the earthquake, identifying body. I mean the bodies in that huge mass disaster in 2008 and 2010 happened in Chile. It was the sixth biggest earthquake in the world. It was a huge experience. And yeah, I'm talking about other topics as well. We can talk about Hawaii also if you want.
Well, now, I don't want to talk about Hawaii. I want to come there.
Yeah, you're more than welcome there.
Well, I appreciate it. And when you come back, we will talk about the earthquake. I believe that was, if I remember reading right, that was an 8.8 earthquake.
8.8, yeah.
8.8, yeah. We'll have you back on the show, and we'll talk about the earthquake and your participation and what you did to help identify the bodies. Again, I want to thank you for being on the show with us, Carlos.
No, thank you so much for inviting me, and yes, see you.
All right, thank you, sir.
Stamps.com is the best. It's like somebody dropped the post office on my desk.
It's faster and cheaper and makes us more productive.
Stamps.com solved my shipping problem. I don't have to go to the post office. I don't have to stand in lines.
There's nothing worse than going to the post office and waiting in line.
Stamps.com makes it easy.
Easy, 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 easy. It makes it simple, and there was no learning curve.
All you need is a computer and a printer and an internet connection.
Everything you need, you have already.
Setting it up was really easy.
Just download the software and print the stamps in a matter of minutes.
Probably took 5 minutes. The program is brilliant.
Postage meters are extremely expensive.
Postage meters have a tendency to jam.
Ka-chunk, ka-chunk, ka-chunk. Can you print only stamps? No. First class?
Priority mail.
Partial.
Next day air.
International.
FedEx.
Tracking information.
Insurance.
It's official U.S. postage.
You could run an entire shipping receiving department with Stamps.com.
And the mailman picks it up.
I don't leave the shop anymore.
It's a no-brainer.
It's a post office in our office.
I like it.
This is Stephen David Lampley, and you're listening to Crime and Forensics, your number one source for true crime radio.
Today we're going to talk about blood spatter analysis, and just what is blood spatter analysis? Probably more involved than you think. Television does a really great job of simplifying a lot of complicated procedures, and this is one of those. It's probably more involved than you think. It involves the examination of the distribution of blood. And that sounds very simple, but trust me, it's anything but simple. Let's start at the very beginning, and let's start with the blood itself. So that as we get into this, you'll better understand. Blood contains 3 types of blood cells. Now, these blood cells are enclosed or suspended, if you will, in a liquid called plasma. Now, the 3 types of blood cells, one is called platelets,
and these are formed in the bone marrow, and they play a major role in hemostasis or blood clotting. In other words, platelets are what is responsible for clotting our blood. The second type of blood cell is called erythrocytes, and those are red blood cells, and those transport oxygen. That's their job, to transport oxygen throughout the body. The third types of cells are leukocytes, and these are white blood cells. Now, these blood cells defend against bacteria and viruses. Now, plasma, which is what carries these blood cells throughout the body, is a yellowish fluid, and it carries the blood, like I said, throughout the body. Plasma is 92% water. Plasma makes up about 55% of the blood, of course, with the remaining 45% being the blood cells themselves. About 8% of the weight of an adult human is in blood. Males have approximately 5 to 6 liters of blood, while adult females will have about 4 to 5 liters of blood. A 40% blood loss can cause irreversible shock and death. Now, blood that is bright red is oxygenated and travels through our arteries. Blood that is dark red is blood that is carried through our veins. Injuries involving arteries will be marked by blood spurting outward from the body. In other words, it's spurting out like a water gun. While injuries involving veins is more of a slow oozing or pouring out of the body. Now, there are 3 physical considerations involving blood that you should know of. One is surface tension. This is the force that maintains the shape of a drop of blood outside the body. Contrary to popular belief, a blood drop is not teardrop shaped. It is spherical shaped. It's round. Another physical consideration of blood is gravity, and another consideration is what we call viscosity, the amount of internal friction in the blood. This is the resistance of a liquid to flow. In other words, it's the resistance given on the blood. Now, what can blood spatter tell us? A wealth of information. One, it can tell us if there's a struggle. It can confirm or refute the victim's, witnesses, suspects, or defendant's positions, or it can confirm or refute statements made on the scene. All right, there are 3 basic configurations of blood spatter as they relate to velocity. Now, when we talk about velocity of blood spatter, we are not talking about the speed of the blood. We're talking about the speed of the force that causes the blood spatter. In other words, the club or the knife or the gun, the speed of which the instrument has taken to cause the blood spatter. These 3 are all on the handout, so you're welcome to follow along with that. The first one is low velocity impact blood spatter. Now, this is typically the spatter or the markings left just simply by the gravitational force of the blood. In other words, drip. Just basically dripping from the finger or head or whatever onto the floor. Now, these stains are typically 4 millimeters in diameter or greater. The next impact blood spatter is medium velocity, and this is usually usually a force traveling greater than 25 feet per second. Now, these stains are typically from 1 to 4 millimeters in diameter, and usually as a result of beatings or stabbings or something similar in that nature. The third type is the high velocity impact blood spatter, and this is a velocity of over 100 feet per second, and the stains typically are less than 1 millimeter in diameter, and usually the result of a gunshot or an explosion, a high-speed collision, or something like that. These usually have a mist-like appearance. All right, we're going to talk about angles of impact. A blood drop falling from your finger to the floor will result in a circular blood spatter when it hits the floor. In other words, you have a drop of blood drops from your finger onto the floor. What you're going to get is a circular blood drop on the floor. Now, if you were to take your finger as the blood is dripping off of it and flip it ever so slightly, the blood is going to travel through the air at an angle. Now, what happens when that takes place is when the blood hits the floor, it's going to hit the floor at an angle, and the blood spatter is going to be more elongated because the blood drop has been traveling at an angle. It's going to look more like an oval than a circle. Now, if you go back and you were to flip your finger a little harder as the blood drop falls off, the angle that the blood is traveling in the air is going to be greater because the force that you flipped your finger is greater. So when the blood hits the floor, it's going to be at a greater angle and will take the shape of an even more elongated oval. The angle of impact determines the blood drop pattern. So the greater the angle, the more elliptical or elongated the drop of blood will be upon impact. In computing the angles, forensics experts or investigators use trigonometric functions and three-dimensional trajectories in order to compute and make a 3D model of the blood spatter and the area of convergence. We're not going to get into all the mathematical equations. That's for another person, another time. We're going to give you some basic information on that. Area of convergence. Now, the area of convergence is the starting point of the blood before it hit the surfaces of the crime scene. Simplified, it is the taking of the blood spatter on the crime scene surfaces and then determining where the blood source was located when the spatter occurred. Now, in detail, and this is on the handout as well, in detail it involves investigators determining the angle from which each droplet of blood hit the object by using strings to project that angle outward into space. Now, by doing this with each blood droplet, a common point will begin showing itself as the strings begin to meet at a common focal point out in that space. This is what is called the area of convergence. It shows where the victim was located when the spatter occurred. Now, we know that's how investigators identify the victim's location during the blood spatter. Let's discuss some of the common blood stain patterns. And these are also on the handout. Arterial spatter. Now, when an artery is severed, it typically spurts out blood under pressure by the heartbeat pressure. Arterial patterns have a specific and distinctive pattern. Typically, they're arched with multiple areas created from each beat of the heart. It's a very, very distinctive pattern. Another pattern is what we call cast-off, and that is created by blood that is deposited on a weapon, such as a hammer or club. When there is blood on an object and the object is swung, it can throw off or cast off some of the blood that is on the object onto surrounding surfaces. Now, this, of course, is called a cast-off pattern. The direction that the object was swung can be determined by the spatter pattern it leaves, and by counting the number of arched patterns will reveal the number of strikes that were hit on the victim. Another pattern is what we call a wipe pattern. A wipe pattern is simply created by an object that is moved through an existing stain and leaving a wipe pattern behind. We have something called a pattern transfer, and it is created when blood comes in contact with another object, and then some of the blood transfers or is wiped off, if you will, onto that object. We have something called a body image pattern. Now, this occurs when a body has been lying on the ground or on the floor or some object, and the blood pools around the body, creating a pattern showing the position of where the body was lying.
Hey, this is J.D. Aldridge from Alabama in the U.S. of A. You're listening to Crime and Forensics with Stephen David Lampley.
We interrupt our programming. This is a national emergency. Important details will follow.
Are you prepared? Legacy Food Storage. The best way to protect your family is by being prepared. Go now to legacyfoodstorage.com. Use coupon code HOM15 now for 15% off. Quick, go!
You've been listening to Crime and Forensics with Stephen David Lampley, your crime and forensic source from coast to coast.
Music by JasonLampley.com.